The alarm tore through the station before I even opened my eyes. Red light flooded the corridor outside my quarters, and the floor shook under my boots as I ran toward the docking bay. Something had gone wrong during the arrival of the Nixtari delegation, and every instinct in my body told me this was not a drill. My name is Daniel Hart, and I was a junior security officer on Aurora Station, humanity's first real foothold in galactic diplomacy. We were new to this game. Most species in the council still looked at us, the way a wolf looks at a rabbit that somehow learned to talk. Weak, temporary, amusing, at best. The Nixtari were not amused by anything. They were an ancient race, tall and pale, with eyes like dark glass, and a presence that made the air feel heavier when they walked into a room. Rumors said they fed on the life energy of other beings, a kind of hunger passed down through thousands of years of bloodline and power. Nobody knew how much of that was true and how much was fear talking. What everyone agreed on was this: you did not cross them. And their princess was arriving today. I reached the docking bay just as the emergency doors sealed shut behind the diplomatic shuttle. Smoke curled from a damaged support strut near the ceiling. Someone had sabotaged the docking clamps, and the entire platform had tilted at a dangerous angle. Station guards shouted orders. Engineers scrambled toward the failing supports. And in the middle of all that chaos stood a woman I had never seen before, calm as still water, while a piece of the ceiling gave way directly above her. I did not think. I moved. I hit her from the side, and we both went down hard as the metal beam crashed into the spot where she had been standing a heartbeat earlier. Sparks rained down around us. My shoulder took the worst of the impact against the deck, and pain shot through my arm, but I did not let go of her until I was sure the debris had stopped falling. When I finally looked up, I found myself staring into eyes the color of a midnight sky, sharp and impossibly focused on me. She was beautiful in a way that felt almost unfair, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant braid, and skin so pale it seemed to glow faintly under the emergency lighting. But it was not her beauty that struck me first. It was the stillness in her expression. She was not shaken. She was not afraid. She was studying me the way a scientist studies something unexpected under a microscope. "You are bleeding," she said, her voice smooth and quiet, despite the chaos around us. I looked down and realized a shard of metal had cut across my forearm during the fall. I had not even felt it happen. "I'll live," I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. "Are you hurt, ma'am?" Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe. Or confusion. "You placed your body between me and that beam," she said slowly, as if testing the words. "You did not know who I was." "Didn't need to," I answered, getting to my feet and offering her a hand, which she did not take. Someone was about to get hurt. That was enough. Around us, station security finally caught up, weapons raised, shouting for everyone to clear the bay. A team of Nixtari guards appeared from the shuttle, their expressions unreadable, moving with a kind of fluid, predatory grace that made my skin prickle. They surrounded the woman instantly, and only then did I understand who I had just tackled to the ground. This was Princess Vassandra of House Nixara, heir to one of the most powerful bloodlines in known space. I had just thrown a foreign princess onto a metal floor in front of her entire honor guard. My stomach dropped. I braced myself for arrest, or worse. Instead, the princess raised one hand, and her guards froze mid-motion, weapons lowering without a single word spoken. She never took her eyes off me.
"Leave him," she said. "He saved my life."
The words hung in the air, strange and heavy. I had expected fear or anger from her guards. Instead, I saw something closer to disbelief. A few of them exchanged glances I could not read. One older guard, tall and scarred along one cheek, studied me with narrowed eyes, as if trying to solve a puzzle that made no sense. Commander Elena Voss arrived moments later, out of breath, her face pale with worry. She was in charge of station security, and I could see the exact moment she realized how badly this could have gone. "Princess Vassandra, I am so sorry," she said quickly. "We will find whoever did this. Please, allow our medical team to examine you." "I am unharmed," Vassandra replied without looking at her. Her attention remained fixed on me, and it made my skin feel warm despite the cold air still leaking from the damaged vents. "Thanks to him. Officer Hart is one of our best," Elena said, glancing at me with an expression somewhere between pride and disbelief. Daniel, are you all right? Just a scratch, I said, pressing my hand against the cut on my arm. The princess stepped closer, close enough that I could feel a strange, cool energy radiating from her, like standing near an open window on a winter night. She reached out and gently took my wounded arm before I could react, tilting it toward the light to examine the cut. This should be treated properly, she said. Human blood loses too much value when left untended. I was not sure if that was concern, or simply an alien way of speaking about something practical, but there was no mistaking the intensity in her gaze as she studied the wound, and then studied me. You risked your life for a stranger, she said quietly, one who does not belong to your world, your customs, or your kind. Why? The question surprised me. I had not thought about it in those terms. To me, it had been simple. Because you were about to get hurt, I said. And I was close enough to stop it. That's really all there is to it. She studied my face for a long moment, as if searching for some hidden motive behind my words, some political angle or clever trick. When she found none, something shifted in her expression, subtle but unmistakable. Curiosity. Real, genuine curiosity. The kind I imagined a being like her rarely felt toward someone like me. Fascinating, she murmured, almost to herself. Elena cleared her throat, clearly eager to move things along, before the situation grew any stranger. Princess, we should get you to secure quarters while we investigate the sabotage. Officer Hart, report to medical for that arm, and then to my office. We need your full account of what happened. I nodded, grateful for an excuse to step back from those unsettling, brilliant eyes. As the guards began escorting the princess away, she paused and looked back over her shoulder at me one final time. I will remember this, Daniel Hart, she said, and something about the way she said my name made it sound like a promise, rather than a simple statement. Then she was gone, disappearing down the corridor surrounded by her silent guards, leaving me standing in the wreckage of the docking bay, with my heart pounding harder than it had during the actual collapse. Elena walked over and studied me carefully. Do you have any idea what you just did? Tackled a princess, I said, in front of her entire guard. I'm aware it probably wasn't in the diplomatic handbook. You saved her life, Elena said. The Nixtari do not forget things like that. They also do not forgive attacks against their royal bloodline easily. Whoever sabotaged those clamps just made a very dangerous enemy, and you just made an extremely powerful ally. I need you sharp for the investigation. This was not an accident, Daniel. Someone wanted her dead, and they wanted it to look like a malfunction. I looked at the twisted metal beam still smoking on the deck, exactly where the princess had been standing only minutes before. A few centimeters of timing, and I would have been too late. Any idea who? I asked. Elena's jaw tightened. Not yet. But if someone was willing to risk an incident this public, this early in the delegation, they are either desperate or they believe they are untouchable. Neither option is good news for us. As the medical team finally arrived to look at my arm, I glanced once more toward the corridor where the princess had vanished. Something about the entire encounter refused to settle quietly in my mind. The way she had studied me was not simple gratitude. It was the look of someone rewriting an assumption she had carried her entire life, the assumption that humans were small, fragile, forgettable things. I had no idea, standing there with blood drying on my sleeve and station alarms still echoing faintly down the halls, that I had just stepped into something far larger than a rescue. I had caught the attention of a princess whose people did not simply forget a debt like this. And somewhere in that station, someone had just failed to kill her, which meant they would try again. The investigation into the sabotage began within the hour, but the true storm was only beginning, and I was standing directly in its path without even realizing it yet. 3 days passed before I saw her again, and in that time I learned more about fear than I had in my entire career on Aurora Station. The investigation into the sabotage had gone nowhere. Whoever tampered with the docking clamps had covered their tracks with skill that suggested training, patience, and resources far beyond a random troublemaker. Commander Elena Voss pulled every surveillance log, questioned every technician with access to that bay, and still came up with nothing solid. Someone powerful wanted the princess dead, and they had gotten close enough to nearly succeed. I had returned to my normal duties, or tried to. Patrol routes, equipment checks, the usual quiet rhythm of station life. but nothing about my days felt normal anymore. Guards from House Nixara had started appearing near my station corridor, watching from a distance, never speaking, simply observing. At first it unsettled me. By the second day, I had grown almost used to it. On the third day, I was summoned. A single Nixtari guard, the same scarred one from the docking bay, appeared at the entrance of the security office and asked for me by name. His voice was low and formal, and he did not explain why, only that Princess Vassandra required my presence. Elena raised an eyebrow at me from across the room. "Careful, Daniel," she said quietly. "Royalty from a species like that does not summon someone without a reason." I followed the guard through sections of the station reserved for the visiting delegation, areas normally closed to regular staff. The design there felt different, colder somehow, with dim lighting and tall doorways built for a taller, more imposing race than mine. Every guard we passed watched me with quiet, calculating interest, the kind of attention that made me feel like a specimen being carried through a laboratory. The guard led me into a private lounge with a wide window overlooking the slow curve of the station and the stars beyond it. Princess Vassandra stood near the glass, dressed in dark formal robes that seemed to absorb the light around her rather than reflect it. She did not turn immediately when I entered, and for a moment I simply stood there, unsure whether to speak first. "You are punctual," she finally said, still gazing out at the stars. "I appreciate that, in a species so often described as impulsive." "I try not to keep royalty waiting," I said. Seemed like good policy. That earned the faintest curve of her lips, not quite a smile, but close. She turned to face me fully, and once again I felt that strange pull in her eyes, sharp and endlessly curious. "I wish to properly thank you," she said, "and to understand you." "Understand me?" I repeated. "I'm not sure there's much to understand." "I'm a security officer. I saw someone in danger. I acted." "That is precisely what confuses me," she said, walking slowly around me, studying me the way someone studies an unfamiliar artifact in a museum. "Among my people, an act like yours would never happen without calculation. Every gesture carries a price, a purpose, a future debt to be collected. You gained nothing from saving me. You risked everything, and expected nothing in return. That is either remarkable foolishness or something far more interesting. Where I come from, we call it decency," I said. "We don't usually calculate the value of saving someone's life before deciding to do it." "A dangerous philosophy," she said, though there was no criticism in her tone, only fascination. "It could easily get you killed." "It nearly did," I admitted. "Didn't stop me." She studied me a moment longer, then gestured toward a low table set with unfamiliar food and drink, deep red liquid in crystal glasses that caught the light strangely. "Sit with me," she said. "I have questions, and I suspect you have some of your own." I hesitated only briefly before taking a seat across from her. Up close, I noticed details I had missed before, the faint markings along her collarbone that shimmered like frost under the light, and the way her eyes seemed to shift shade depending on the angle, from deep violet to near black. "Ask your questions," I said. "I'll answer honestly, as much as I can." "Very well," she said, folding her hands elegantly in her lap. "Tell me, Daniel Hart, are you afraid of me?" The question caught me off guard, mostly because of how directly she asked it. I considered lying, offering some polite diplomatic answer, but something about her sharp, patient gaze told me she would see through it instantly. "A little," I admitted. "Your people have a reputation. Strength, power, a certain reputation for being dangerous when crossed. I'd be a fool not to feel some caution around that. And yet you sit here calmly, sharing a drink with me," she said. "Caution isn't the same as fear stopping me from doing something," I said. "I respect what you represent. I'm just not going to let respect turn into groveling." Something flickered behind her eyes again, that same fascination from the docking bay, deeper this time. "My people do not often hear such honesty," she said. "Those who approach me typically offer flattery, hoping to gain favor, or fear, hoping to avoid punishment. You offer neither." "Would flattery work better?" I asked, half joking. "No," she said simply. "It would bore me terribly." I found myself smiling, despite the strange formality of the room around us. There was something oddly refreshing about her bluntness, a directness I had not expected from someone raised in a court, built on centuries of tradition and political maneuvering. "Tell me about your people," she said, leaning forward slightly. "Not the reports my advisors compile, filled with statistics and strategic assessments. Tell me what it means to be human, in your own words." I thought about the question carefully before answering. "We're stubborn," I said, "sometimes to a fault. We fight for each other even when it costs us everything. We laugh in situations that probably don't call for laughing. We make mistakes, plenty of them, but we keep trying anyway. I think that's the core of it. We don't give up, even when giving up would be the smarter choice. A species that chooses feeling over calculation," she said thoughtfully. "Among the Nixtari, such behavior would be considered weakness, a flaw bred out of our bloodlines many generations ago." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe it's the reason I'm sitting here instead of you being buried under that beam 3 days ago." Her expression shifted, something unreadable passing across her features before settling into quiet consideration. "A fair point," she said, one I had not considered in quite those terms. We talked for what felt like hours, though I lost track of actual time, somewhere in the middle of the conversation. She asked about human customs, our history, our conflicts, our art, absorbing every answer with genuine interest rather than polite obligation. In turn, I learned about her world, the rigid structure of Nixtari nobility, the ancient hierarchy of bloodlines, the strange bioenergy exchange her people called the bond, something both spiritual and physical, tied deeply to trust and connection between individuals. "It is considered the highest form of intimacy among my kind," she explained at one point, her voice quieter than before. "A bond formed not through obligation, but through genuine choice. Rare, and rarely honest, given how calculated our court tends to be." "Sounds lonely," I said before I could stop myself. She looked at me sharply, and for a moment, I worried I had overstepped. Then, slowly, she nodded. "It is," she admitted. "More than most would ever guess, looking at someone in my position." The vulnerability in her voice surprised me, a crack in the composed, regal exterior she had shown since the moment we met. I did not push further, sensing this was not something she shared easily, and instead let the silence settle comfortably between us. Eventually, the scarred guard returned to inform her that other diplomatic matters required her attention, and our conversation came to a natural close. As I stood to leave, she rose as well, studying me one final time, with that same intense curiosity. "I find myself thinking of our conversation long after you speak, Daniel Hart," she said. "This is unusual for me." "I'll take that as a compliment," I said. "You should," she replied, the faintest smile finally breaking through completely. "It is meant as one." As I walked back through the delegation section toward familiar territory, my mind raced through everything that had just happened. A princess of one of the most powerful and feared species in known space had spent hours speaking with me, not out of obligation, but out of genuine interest, asking questions no report could answer, listening to my answers as if they mattered. I told myself it was simple curiosity on her part, a passing fascination with something unfamiliar. I told myself this would fade once the delegation concluded its business and moved on to the next star system. I was wrong on both counts, though I would not fully understand how wrong until later that same week, when the political currents around the delegation shifted violently, and the quiet danger surrounding Princess Vassandra revealed itself to be far from finished. Because somewhere among her own trusted circle, someone had already begun watching our growing connection, with far more concern than curiosity, calculating exactly how dangerous a bond between a Nixtari princess and a human security officer might become to their own carefully laid plans. The invitation arrived without warning, delivered by the scarred guard, whose name I had finally learned was Kale, head of the princess's personal detail. He found me during a routine equipment check in the lower decks, and simply stated that I was expected at a formal gathering of the Nixtari court that evening, one being held aboard their flagship, temporarily docked alongside Aurora Station. Formal gathering turned out to be a significant understatement. Commander Elena Voss nearly refused to let me attend once she understood the scale of the event. Nobles from several allied bloodlines had traveled considerable distances to be present, drawn by rumors that Princess Vassandra intended to make some kind of announcement during her extended stay near human territory. My presence, apparently requested personally by the princess, had already stirred considerable interest before I had even set foot aboard the ship. "This isn't a courtesy dinner, Daniel," Elena warned me, as I prepared to leave. "Nixtari court gatherings are political battlefields disguised as social events. One wrong word, one wrong gesture, and you could embarrass the entire human delegation, or worse, become a target yourself." "I'll be careful," I promised, though I had no real idea what careful meant in a setting like the one I was about to enter. The flagship interior made the princess's private lounge look modest by comparison. Towering columns of dark stone lined a massive hall bathed in soft, shifting light that seemed to pulse gently like a heartbeat. Nobles in elegant, severe clothing moved through the space with practiced grace, each conversation layered with subtle undertones I could not fully decode. Every gaze that landed on me carried the same mixture of curiosity and quiet judgment, the human oddity brought into a world built for beings far older, and by their own estimation, far superior. Kale guided me through the crowd toward the center of the hall, where Princess Vysandra stood, speaking with a tall, sharp-featured noble, whose posture radiated barely restrained ambition. She wore deep crimson robes that night, a striking contrast against her pale skin, and the moment her eyes found mine across the room, something in her expression softened, just slightly, before returning to its composed public mask. "Ah, here he is," she said as I approached. "Lord Draven, allow me to introduce Daniel Hart, the human officer who saved my life during the docking incident." Lord Draven studied me with an expression that reminded me of someone examining an insect that had wandered somewhere it did not belong. "The human," he said slowly, as if tasting the word. I had heard rumors of this incident, though I confess, I assumed they were exaggerated for effect. "No exaggeration necessary," I said evenly, though I appreciate the skepticism, healthy trait in a leader. A flicker of surprise crossed his features before settling back into cold composure. "Bold, for a creature so far beneath our standing," he said. "Lord Draven," Vysandra said, her tone carrying a subtle warning edge. "Daniel is a guest under my protection this evening." "Of course, Princess," he replied smoothly, though his eyes lingered on me a moment longer, before he offered a shallow bow and drifted away into the crowd. "He seems delightful," I muttered once he was out of earshot. "He is my cousin," Vysandra said, a hint of dry amusement in her voice, "and one of several nobles who believe himself entitled to a closer position within our succession. Ignore him if you can manage it. He rarely means what he says directly, which makes him considerably more dangerous than those who do." The evening unfolded in layers of quiet tension, disguised as elegant conversation. I found myself pulled into discussions with various nobles, each testing me in subtle ways, probing for weakness, arrogance, or foolishness they could later use against the princess for associating with someone so far outside their expected circles. I answered honestly whenever possible, careful but never groveling, remembering Vysandra's earlier words about flattery boring her. At one point, a noble woman with silver markings along her cheeks asked pointedly whether humans understood the concept of true loyalty, or whether our short lifespans made such commitment meaningless. "Our lives being short doesn't make loyalty meaningless," I said. "If anything, it makes it more valuable. We don't have centuries to decide who's worth trusting. We commit quickly, and we mean it fully, because we understand exactly how limited our time really is." The noblewoman studied me for a long moment before nodding slowly, clearly unprepared for an answer, with any real depth behind it. Word of the exchange seemed to spread through the hall within minutes, and gradually, the outright hostility in the room shifted into something closer to cautious reassessment. Not everyone shared that shift. I noticed Lord Draven watching from across the hall throughout the evening, his expression carefully neutral, though something calculating simmered beneath the surface each time his gaze crossed mine. Later, during a brief moment when Vysandra had been pulled away by an elderly diplomat requiring her attention, Draven approached me directly, his voice pitched low enough that only I could hear. "You should understand something, human," he said, all pretense of politeness gone from his tone. "Whatever fascination the princess currently holds for you, it will fade. It always does. She is young, and young minds are drawn to novelty. But you are a novelty, nothing more, a curiosity, destined to be forgotten the moment something more interesting captures her attention." "Maybe," I said, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a rattled response. Or maybe she actually values genuine character over inherited titles. Strange concept, I know. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Careful, he said quietly. Attachments to the royal bloodline carry consequences far beyond simple embarrassment. Some of those consequences prove permanent. He walked away before I could respond, leaving the threat hanging heavily in the air behind him. I filed the exchange away carefully, intending to mention it to Vissandra once the opportunity presented itself, though the rest of the evening kept us both occupied with an endless stream of formal introductions and careful political maneuvering. Later that night, after most of the nobles had departed and the grand hall had emptied into quiet stillness, Vissandra found me near a wide viewing window overlooking the stars, taking a rare moment to simply breathe after hours of careful, guarded conversation. "You survived your first true court gathering," she said, stepping up beside me. "A respectable achievement, considering the company involved." "Your cousin isn't exactly subtle about his opinions of me," I said. Her expression darkened slightly. "What did he say to you?" I relayed the conversation as accurately as I could remember, watching her expression shift from careful neutrality into something colder, sharper, unmistakably protective. "Draven has always resented anything that threatens the influence he believes belongs to him," she said. "He has positioned himself carefully within the succession for many years, cultivating alliances, waiting for the right moment to press his advantage. I suspect your presence, and the attention I have given you, has unsettled those careful calculations more than he wishes to admit. Should I be worried?" I asked. "You should be cautious," she said. "Draven does not act rashly. If he intends harm, it will come disguised as accident, or through hands not directly his own. The sabotage during my arrival remains unexplained. I have long suspected his involvement, though I have found no solid proof." A cold weight settled in my stomach. "You think your own cousin tried to kill you?" "I think ambition makes monsters of even those we once considered family," she said quietly. "I have learned to trust very few people within my own court, Daniel. It is a lonely existence, surrounded by beings who calculate every gesture for potential advantage. That's why you asked me all those questions," I realized aloud. "You were trying to figure out if I was different." "Yes," she admitted, "and you are. More than I anticipated when this began." We stood together in comfortable silence for a while, watching the slow drift of stars beyond the glass. Eventually, she spoke again, her voice quieter, more vulnerable than the composed princess persona she wore throughout the evening. "There is a tradition within my bloodline," she said carefully, "a ceremony called the joining, reserved for those who form a bond built on absolute trust and genuine choice, rather than political arrangement. It has not occurred within my family for several generations, as most unions are carefully calculated for strategic advantage, rather than authentic connection." "Why tell me this?" I asked, though some part of me already suspected the answer, my heart beginning to race, despite my attempt to remain calm. "Because for the first time in my very long life," she said, turning to face me fully, her dark eyes holding mine with unwavering intensity, "I find myself considering a bond built on nothing but genuine choice, and that consideration frightens me far more than any political threat within my own court." Before I could respond, an alarm suddenly blared through the flagship, sharp and urgent, cutting through the quiet moment like a blade. Kale appeared almost instantly, his expression tight with controlled alarm. "Princess, we have a security breach," he reported quickly. "Unauthorized access, detected near the lower engineering deck. Given recent events, I recommend immediate evacuation to secure quarters." Vissandra's expression hardened instantly, the vulnerability from moments before, replaced by sharp, focused resolve. "Show me," she commanded. As we followed Kale through the ship toward the source of the breach, I could not shake the feeling that whatever Vissandra had begun to say to me only moments earlier had just been interrupted by exactly the kind of danger she had been warning me about. Someone within her own trusted circle was making their move, and this time, I suspected, the target might not be limited to the princess alone. Because now, standing beside her during a moment that had clearly shifted something fundamental between us, I had become a target as well. The lower engineering deck looked like a battlefield by the time we arrived. 2 Nixtari guards lay unconscious near a breached maintenance hatch, their weapons scattered across the floor, while smoke drifted lazily from a damaged power conduit nearby. Kale knelt beside his fallen comrades, checking for signs of life, his expression grim but focused. "They are alive," he reported. "Rendered unconscious, not killed. Whoever did this wanted to avoid unnecessary attention, or perhaps wished to avoid an official investigation into murder. Or they wanted this to look like something other than what it truly is," Vassandra said, her eyes scanning the scene with sharp, analytical precision. "What was accessed through that hatch?" Kale moved to a nearby console, fingers moving quickly across unfamiliar controls. His expression darkened further as data scrolled across the screen. "The ship's core stabilization systems," he said. "Someone attempted to access the primary power regulator. Had they succeeded, the resulting overload would have compromised the entire vessel." "With me aboard," Vassandra said quietly. "And likely significant damage to Aurora Station as well, given our current docking proximity," Kale added grimly. The weight of that statement settled over the room. This was not a simple assassination attempt against one person. This was an attack designed to cause massive, indiscriminate destruction, one that would have claimed countless lives across both the flagship and the human station beyond it. "Lock down all decks," Vassandra commanded, her voice carrying an authority I had not fully witnessed until that moment. "Full security sweep, every guest and crew member accounted for. I want to know who left that gathering before the alarm sounded." As guards scrambled to follow her orders, I found myself replaying the evening's events in my mind, searching for anything that might prove useful. Something clicked into place suddenly, a detail I had nearly overlooked in the chaos. "Draven," I said. "He left the hall shortly before you found me at the viewing window. I remember, because I noticed him walking toward the lower corridors, instead of the main departure route." Vassandra's expression turned to stone. "Are you certain?" "Certain enough to mention it," I said. "I could be wrong, but given what he said to me earlier tonight, it seems worth investigating." She turned to Kale immediately. "Locate Lord Draven. Discreetly if possible, though I doubt discretion will remain an option for much longer." The search took nearly an hour, during which tension coiled tighter throughout the ship with every passing minute. Eventually, Kale returned with news that confirmed our worst suspicions. Draven had been found in a private shuttle bay, preparing what appeared to be a hasty departure, along with 2 additional accomplices, identified as members of his personal staff. When confronted, Draven did not bother denying his involvement, his earlier calculated composure finally cracking under the weight of exposure. Standing before Vassandra in a tense security chamber, surrounded by guards, he allowed genuine bitterness to color his voice for the first time since I had met him. "You would have chosen a human over your own bloodline," he spat, glaring at Vassandra with open contempt. "Over generations of careful tradition, careful alliances, all discarded because some creature pulled you away from a falling beam. Do you understand what that would mean for our house, for our standing among the council? I acted to protect our family's future, nothing more." "You acted to protect your own ambition," Vassandra replied, her voice cold and unwavering. "You attempted to murder me and countless innocent lives alongside me, simply because my personal choices threatened your position within the succession. That is not protection, Draven. That is treason." "Treason implies loyalty existed to betray," he said bitterly. "I owe nothing to a princess more interested in human curiosities than her own people's survival." Guards moved to restrain him, and he offered no further resistance as he was led away, though his cold gaze lingered on me one final time before disappearing from view, a promise of continued resentment even in defeat. The aftermath of Draven's arrest sent shockwaves through the remaining Nixthari delegation still aboard the flagship. Formal proceedings began almost immediately, with council representatives arriving from allied systems to oversee the investigation and subsequent judgment. For days, Aurora Station buzzed with tension as diplomats, guards, and officials moved through corridors normally reserved for quiet, routine business. Throughout it all, Vassandra remained composed in public, handling each proceeding with the same careful authority I had witnessed during the crisis on the engineering deck. Privately, however, I noticed the toll it took on her, the exhaustion behind her eyes during rare quiet moments we managed to share, the weight of betrayal from someone she had once trusted as family. "I should have seen it sooner," she admitted during one such moment, standing beside me in the same viewing lounge where our conversation had first begun. I allowed my guard down around him because of shared blood, shared history. A costly mistake. You couldn't have known for certain, I said. Trusting family isn't a weakness, even when that trust gets betrayed. Perhaps, she said softly, though it has taught me to value certain things far more carefully than I once did. Genuine trust, genuine loyalty, qualities I have found, unexpectedly, in someone entirely outside my own world. Word of the assassination attempt, and my role in exposing it, spread quickly throughout the delegation, and eventually reached the wider Galactic Council overseeing diplomatic relations across known space. What had begun as a private, personal connection between myself and Princess Vysandra had suddenly become a matter of significant political interest, discussed openly among diplomats and nobles from multiple species. Commander Elena Voss called me into her office during this period, her expression a careful mixture of concern and cautious pride. "You've become something of a diplomatic phenomenon, Daniel," she said. "Council representatives are requesting formal reports on your involvement with the Nixtari delegation. Some see this as an opportunity to strengthen ties between our species. Others view it with considerable suspicion." "I never meant for any of this to become political," I said honestly. "I just tried to help someone in danger, and things kept escalating from there." "Intentions rarely matter once events reach this scale," Elena said. "What matters now is how you and the princess choose to proceed from here. The entire council will be watching closely, and I suspect a certain announcement may already be forming in Vysandra's mind, judging by the reports I have received." I did not fully understand what Elena meant until several days later, when a formal summons arrived requesting my presence at a full council assembly, scheduled to address the recent security crisis and the broader diplomatic implications surrounding the incident. Representatives from multiple allied species, along with senior Nixtari nobility, would be present, making it the largest and most significant gathering since the delegation's arrival. Standing in my quarters that morning, preparing for what Elena had warned might become a defining moment in human diplomatic history, I felt a mixture of nervous anticipation and quiet resolve. Whatever awaited me within that assembly hall, I intended to face it honestly, without pretense, exactly as I had approached every interaction with Vysandra since the moment I first pulled her away from that falling beam. I had no way of predicting the scale of what she intended to reveal before the entire gathered council, though the knowing look Kale gave me as he escorted me toward the assembly hall suggested even the princess's own guard understood something significant was about to unfold. The massive doors ahead slid open, revealing a hall filled with representatives from a dozen different species, their attention immediately shifting toward me as I entered. Vysandra stood at the center of the gathering, dressed in formal ceremonial robes I had not seen before, deep silver fabric embroidered with intricate patterns representing her bloodline's ancient heritage. She turned as I approached, and the look in her eyes told me, without a single word spoken, that everything was about to change permanently, for both of us, and for the fragile, growing relationship between our two very different worlds. The assembly hall fell into complete silence as I crossed the open floor toward Vysandra, every eye in the room tracking my movement with open curiosity. Delegates from species I had only ever seen in briefing documents watched from tiered seating that curved around the central platform, their expressions ranging from mild interest to outright skepticism at the sight of a human standing so prominently within such an important gathering. Vysandra offered a small, private nod as I reached her side, though her expression quickly returned to the composed, regal mask required for the proceedings ahead. A senior council representative, an elderly being with deep blue skin and calm, measured authority, called the assembly to order, addressing the recent security crisis and Draven's subsequent arrest for treason and attempted mass destruction. The formal proceedings continued for nearly an hour, covering evidence, testimony, and the council's official judgment regarding Draven's punishment, which would involve permanent exile from Nixtari territory and stripping of all noble titles. Throughout it all, I remained standing quietly beside Vysandra, uncertain exactly why my presence had been specifically requested, for what seemed like matters purely internal to her own people. Then, as the formal proceedings regarding Draven concluded, the elderly representative turned toward Vysandra with an expectant expression. "Princess Vysandra, before this council disperses, you requested time to address a separate matter of considerable importance," he said. "The floor is yours." Vysandra stepped forward, and the entire hall seemed to hold its breath collectively, sensing the significance of whatever announcement was about to follow. She glanced briefly toward me, before addressing the gathered representatives, her voice carrying clearly across the silent chamber. "Esteemed Council," she began, "recent events have forced me to reconsider many assumptions I once held regarding loyalty, trust, and the true measure of worth within any individual, regardless of species or bloodline. I was raised within a court built on calculated alliances, strategic marriages, and careful political maneuvering, where genuine connection remained a rare and often dangerous luxury." She paused, allowing her words to settle before continuing. "During my time near human territory, I encountered someone who challenged every assumption I carried into this delegation, a being who protected me without calculation, who spoke honestly, regardless of consequence, and who ultimately helped expose a betrayal within my own bloodline that could have cost countless lives, including my own." Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates, though Vassandra continued without hesitation, her gaze finding mine briefly, before returning to the wider hall. "According to ancient Nixtari tradition, a bond formed through genuine choice, rather than political arrangement, represents the highest expression of trust and commitment our people recognize. Such bonds have grown exceedingly rare within recent generations, replaced almost entirely by calculated unions designed purely for strategic advantage." She turned fully toward me now, and I felt every gaze in the room settle on the two of us simultaneously. "I stand before this council to declare my intention to form such a bond, choosing Daniel Hart of Aurora Station as my spouse, not for political advantage, not for strategic alliance, but because he has proven himself worthy of genuine trust, in ways few among my own people ever have." The hall erupted into immediate, chaotic reaction. Some delegates rose from their seats in open shock, while others exchanged rapid, hushed conversations with neighboring representatives. Among the Nixtari nobility present, expressions ranged from stunned disbelief to poorly concealed outrage, centuries of tradition upended by a single declaration. An older Nixtari noble near the front rose sharply, his voice cutting through the surrounding noise. "This is unprecedented," he declared. "A member of the royal bloodline choosing a spouse from outside our species entirely, without council approval, without proper vetting through established succession protocols. Such a bond cannot simply be declared without challenge." "Then challenge it," Vassandra replied evenly, without a hint of hesitation. "Ancient law permits formal contest against any declared bond, should sufficient members of the court object. I am prepared to defend my choice, through whatever means tradition requires." The noble's eyes narrowed, clearly caught off guard by her immediate willingness to face opposition directly. After a tense moment, he straightened and addressed the wider assembly. "I invoke the right of formal challenge," he announced. "Let the bond be tested through the trial of worth, as tradition dictates, before this council grants any recognition to such an unprecedented union." A wave of murmurs spread through the hall again, and I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. I had no idea what a trial of worth actually involved, though the grim expressions on the faces of several Nixtari guards suggested it would not be a simple formality. Kale leaned close, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "The trial of worth traditionally involves a direct contest between the challenger and the individual whose worth is being questioned," he explained quietly. "It has not been invoked in generations, though ancient records describe it as physically demanding, occasionally dangerous, designed to prove resilience, determination, and genuine commitment rather than raw strength alone." "And if I refuse?" I asked quietly. "Refusal would be viewed as confirmation of unworthiness," Kale said. "The bond would be dissolved immediately, and Princess Vassandra's judgment would be publicly questioned before the entire council." I looked toward Vassandra, who was watching me carefully, searching my expression for any sign of hesitation. I thought about everything that had brought me to this moment: the falling beam, the quiet conversations in her private lounge, the genuine vulnerability she had shown me despite centuries of practiced composure, and the very real danger we had faced together, against her own cousin's betrayal. "I accept the challenge," I said, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. A ripple of surprise moved through the assembly at my immediate acceptance, though Vassandra's expression shifted into something resembling quiet pride, mixed with unmistakable concern for what lay ahead. The trial was scheduled for the following day, held within a specially prepared arena aboard the Nixtari flagship, designed specifically for such ancient contests. Word of the unprecedented event spread rapidly throughout both the delegation and Aurora Station itself, drawing considerable attention from representatives of multiple species eager to witness whatever unfolded. That evening, Vassandra found me in my quarters, her expression heavy with concern despite her earlier composed defiance before the council. "You do not have to do this," she said quietly. "I could withdraw the declaration, avoid the trial entirely, spare you unnecessary danger." "And let that noble believe he was right about me?" I said. "Let your own court believe you made a mistake choosing someone unworthy? I don't think either of us actually wants that outcome." "The trial will not favor you physically," she admitted. "The challenger, Lord Vesic, is renowned throughout our court for exceptional endurance and combat skill. Ancient trials of worth were designed for beings of our physiology, capable of enduring far greater physical demands than humans typically manage." "Then I'll need to find another way to win," I said. "Strength isn't the only thing that matters, right? You told me that yourself, back when we first started talking." She studied me for a long moment, something warm and fierce flickering behind her earlier concern. "You truly believe that?" she said, more statement than question. "I have to," I said, "because giving up isn't really an option I'm willing to consider." The following day arrived with the entire station and flagship buzzing with anticipation. The arena itself proved larger and more elaborate than I had anticipated, a wide circular space surrounded by tiered seating, filled with delegates, nobles, and curious onlookers from across the Galactic Council. Ancient stone pillars lined the perimeter, etched with symbols representing centuries of Nixtari tradition and history. Lord Vesic stood waiting at the center of the arena when I arrived, tall and imposing, his physique clearly built for the physical demands ancient trials once required. He studied me with a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled condescension, clearly expecting an easy victory against someone so obviously outmatched in raw physical terms. "This will not take long," he said as I approached. "We'll see," I replied simply. The elderly council representative from the previous day's assembly stepped forward to explain the trial's specific format. Rather than a simple contest of strength, the trial of worth, according to ancient tradition, involved 3 separate challenges designed to test different aspects of character: physical endurance, strategic thinking, and finally, a direct test of resolve and commitment. The first challenge involved a grueling endurance course through the arena's outer ring, testing stamina and determination rather than pure strength. Vesic moved through it with practiced ease, his physiology clearly suited for such demands, while I struggled through sheer determination alone, refusing to stop despite exhaustion burning through every muscle. I finished considerably behind him, though I finished, which according to ancient rules, mattered more than speed alone. The second challenge tested strategic thinking, through a complex puzzle representing ancient Nixtari governance principles, designed to evaluate wisdom and judgment, rather than physical capability. Here, surprisingly, my human perspective proved valuable, approaching the puzzle from angles Vesic's traditional training had not prepared him to consider. I solved it faster than expected, drawing surprised murmurs from the watching crowd. The final challenge, the direct test of resolve, involved a formal contest of will, rather than physical combat, an ancient practice where each participant faced a series of increasingly difficult trials, designed to test whether they would abandon their commitment when faced with genuine hardship. Vesic approached each trial with confident, practiced composure, clearly experienced in such formal contests. I approached each trial thinking only of Vassandra, of the genuine connection we had built despite every obstacle placed before us, of the quiet vulnerability she had shown me when discussing her own loneliness within a court built on calculation rather than authentic trust. Whatever physical or mental challenge the trial presented, I refused to let it break my resolve, drawing strength from something Vesic, for all his training and confidence, seemed to lack entirely. Genuine, unwavering commitment, born from real emotional connection, rather than obligation or tradition. As the final trial concluded, the elderly council representative studied both participants carefully before addressing the gathered assembly. "The trial of worth has concluded," he announced. While Lord Vesic demonstrated superior physical capability throughout the endurance challenge, Daniel Hart demonstrated exceptional strategic insight during the second trial, and unmatched resolve throughout the final test of commitment. According to ancient tradition, the trial of worth values genuine character over singular physical dominance. This council recognizes Daniel Hart as having proven himself worthy of the declared bond. The arena erupted into a mixture of stunned silence and gradual applause, spreading slowly through the crowd as the significance of the moment settled over everyone present. Vesic, though clearly disappointed, offered a respectful nod in my direction, acknowledging the outcome with more grace than I had expected given his earlier confidence. Vassandra moved through the crowd toward me, her expression radiant with something I had never seen from her before. Genuine, unguarded joy breaking completely through centuries of practiced royal composure. She took my hands gently in hers, her dark eyes bright with emotion as the surrounding crowd continued their applause. "You proved every doubt within this court wrong," she said softly. "Not through strength alone, but through exactly the qualities that drew me to you from the very beginning." "I told you," I said, smiling despite the exhaustion still burning through my body. Giving up was never really an option. The formal bonding ceremony took place 3 weeks later, blending elements of both human and Nixtari tradition, in a celebration that drew representatives from across the Galactic Council, eager to witness firsthand the historic union between our two vastly different species. What had begun as a chaotic rescue during a docking accident had transformed into something far larger than either of us could have anticipated, a symbol of genuine connection, bridging cultures separated by centuries of misunderstanding and cautious distance. Standing beside Vassandra during the ceremony, surrounded by both human colleagues and Nixtari nobility, who had once viewed me with open skepticism, I reflected on everything that had led to this moment. A single act of instinct during a falling beam had rippled outward into something that would reshape diplomatic relations between our species for generations to come. Humanity, once dismissed as fragile and forgettable among the galaxy's older, more powerful civilizations, had proven itself capable of earning genuine respect, not through overwhelming strength or ancient tradition, but through the simple, stubborn refusal to abandon what truly mattered, regardless of the obstacles placed in the way. As Vassandra took my hand before the gathered assembly, sealing our bond according to ancient Nixtari custom, I understood that this was only the beginning of a much larger story, one where humanity's place among the stars would be defined not by fear or dismissal, but by the quiet, unshakable strength found in genuine loyalty, honest connection, and the courage to stand firmly beside those we choose to protect, regardless of the differences that might otherwise divide us. The galaxy, watching closely, had just witnessed the beginning of something entirely new.